Mugabo had everything: a thriving business, a beautiful wife, and the perfect life. But when he walked in one evening and found his wife in the arms of their gardener, everything shattered. Now, with his company slipping through his fingers, Mugabo faces the ultimate betrayal. But he's not just going to take it. This time, he's fighting back. Mugabo had always believed that his life was perfect. He had a successful company, a beautiful home in Kigali, and a loving wife, Immaculée, who had been by his side since the early days. Together, they had built a life that many envied. While Mugabo spent his days growing his company, Mugabo Enterprises, Immaculée took care of their home and enjoyed the luxuries that came with her husband's success. But as Mugabo's business thrived, something else began to falter: his marriage. He had become more focused on his work, leaving earlier in the morning and coming home late at night. Immaculée often found herself alone, watching as Mugabo's attention drifted further and further away from her. Despite her efforts to get his attention, Mugabo would always respond the same way. "I'm doing this for us, for our future," he would say, brushing off her concerns. "Just a few more deals, and then we can enjoy life together." But a few more deals turned into months and eventually years, leaving Immaculée feeling neglected and lonely in their big, empty house. That's when Karangwa came into the picture. Karangwa was their gardener, a humble man who worked quietly in the background, maintaining their beautiful yard. He was muscular, strong, and always around when Mugabo wasn't. What began as simple conversations between Immaculée and Karangwa about the flowers, the weather, or the state of the garden soon turned into longer talks. Karangwa was attentive, listening to Immaculée's frustrations about her husband's long hours and emotional distance. Immaculée found comfort in Karangwa's presence. He made her feel seen, something Mugabo hadn't done in a long time. One afternoon, while Mugabo was away on a business trip, Immaculée crossed a line that she never thought she would. It started with an innocent request. "Karangwa," Immaculée had said, "can you help me fix the irrigation system at the back? It's been giving us problems, and I'm not sure what to do." Karangwa smiled, his easygoing nature showing. "Of course, madam. I'll take care of it." That afternoon, Karangwa and Immaculée worked side by side, laughing and talking more than usual. As the sun set and their work was done, a moment passed between them, a moment that changed everything. A glance lingered too long, a touch felt too intimate, and before either of them could stop it, they kissed. Immaculée had never meant for things to go that far, but the connection between her and Karangwa grew stronger each day. What started as a simple kiss turned into a full-blown affair. For months, while Mugabo worked late into the night, Karangwa and Immaculée grew closer, meeting in secret and sharing moments they knew could destroy everything. At first, Mugabo didn't notice. His mind was too focused on his business deals, securing partnerships, and expanding his company. He was unaware of the growing bond between his wife and the gardener. But slowly, things began to change. Immaculée became distant, cold, and less interested in their once comfortable life together. She stopped asking him when he would be home and no longer cared about his late nights. Mugabo thought it was just a rough patch in their marriage. He assumed that once the business was stable, he could spend more time with her and things would go back to normal. But by the time he realized how deep the problem was, it was too late. One evening, Mugabo came home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Immaculée with dinner. But as he walked into the house, he found something that shattered his world. In their living room, on the couch where they had once sat together, were Immaculée and Karangwa, caught in a moment of undeniable intimacy. Mugabo stood frozen at the doorway, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Immaculée jumped up, guilt written all over her face, while Karangwa sat in silence, not even trying to make an excuse. "What is this?" Mugabo's voice trembled with disbelief and anger. "What are you doing with the gardener?" Immaculée, panicked, tried to speak. "Mugabo, I didn't mean for this to happen. You've been so distant. But Mugabo couldn't hear her anymore, his vision blurred with rage as he stormed out of the house, leaving the life he thought he knew behind. Everything had fallen apart in an instant. After the discovery of the affair, Mugabo moved out of their home, but the pain of the betrayal lingered. Immaculée had shattered his trust, but what hurt even more was that she had chosen a man like Karangwa, someone who worked in the garden, someone Mugabo thought of as beneath them. While Mugabo's personal life spiraled, Immaculée and Karangwa continued their relationship openly. But what no one expected was how Karangwa began to weave himself into Mugabo's business. Immaculée, who still owned a significant portion of the company due to their marriage, slowly started bringing Karangwa into the company's affairs. At first, it was small things, attending business meetings with her, getting to know the board members, but soon Karangwa's influence began to grow. Immaculée had convinced herself that Karangwa could be more than just a gardener. She believed in him, trusted him, and began sharing more and more of Mugabo's business secrets with him. Over time, with Immaculée's guidance, Karangwa used the money she had from the marriage to start buying shares in Mugabo Enterprises through intermediaries. The board members, blinded by greed, didn't care who was buying the shares as long as the money was right. Soon, Karangwa, the once humble gardener, began owning a piece of the company Mugabo had worked so hard to build. It was a cruel twist of fate, and Mugabo could hardly believe what was happening. The man who had betrayed him was now taking over his life, not only personally, but professionally as well. Mugabo felt trapped, watching helplessly as the very foundation of his life crumbled. His company, his marriage, and his sense of pride, all slipping away. Mugabo sat alone in his office late one evening, the soft hum of Kigali's night settling in outside the large windows. The world he had once built, brick by brick, felt foreign to him now. His company, Mugabo Enterprises, was still successful, but it no longer felt like it belonged to him. The betrayal had taken more than just his marriage. It had robbed him of his confidence and control over his own life. The months after the discovery of Immaculée's affair had been a blur. Mugabo had moved out of their home, throwing himself even deeper into his work, trying to drown out the pain. But the more he worked, the more distant he felt from everything he had once valued. To make matters worse, Karangwa, the man who had once been nothing more than a gardener, was now regularly attending meetings and slowly inching his way into the business Mugabo had built from the ground up. It was almost unbelievable. Immaculée had convinced the board to trust Karangwa, telling them that he was sharp and had business potential. Slowly, Karangwa had gained influence. He bought small shares of the company, his name beginning to appear on documents Mugabo signed without realizing. It was a bitter pill to swallow for Mugabo, but he wasn't ready to fight back, not yet. He had been humiliated, and the weight of that humiliation kept him silent. But now, sitting alone in his office, something began to stir inside him. He was tired of being the victim. His company, his pride, and his future were slipping away, and if he didn't act soon, Karangwa could take everything from him. Mugabo's thoughts were interrupted by a knock on his door. "Come in," he called out, not expecting anyone this late. The door opened, and Akimana, his sharp and capable assistant, stepped in. She had been with him through all of this, silently watching as the man she worked for struggled to keep his life together. Akimana had always been more than just an assistant. She was the one who had kept the company running smoothly while Mugabo tried to sort through his personal life. "You're still here?" Akimana asked, her voice steady as she entered the room. Mugabo sighed. "Where else would I be? It's not like I have much waiting for me at home." Akimana sat down across from him, placing a folder on his desk. "I've been looking into some things," she said, her tone calm but firm. "You need to see this." Mugabo raised an eyebrow and opened the folder. Inside were documents, financial reports, stock transactions, and board meeting minutes. As he flipped through the pages, his face darkened. "These are Karangwa's investments in the company," Akimana explained. "He's been slowly buying shares through third parties. He owns more than you realize. And with Immaculate's influence on the board, they've been backing his decisions. It's more serious than you think." Mugabo slammed the folder shut, his frustration boiling over. "How did I let this happen?" he muttered under his breath. "How did I let him take everything from me?" Akimana watched him carefully. "You were distracted," she said simply, "but it's not too late to fight back." Mugabo looked at her, his eyes searching hers for something, hope, a plan, anything. "What do you suggest?" Akimana leaned forward, her expression hardening with determination. "First, you need to show them you're not backing down. The company party is coming up in a few days. It's your chance to remind everyone who you are and what you've built. Show up strong. Bring someone with you. Let Immaculate and Karangwa see that you're not broken." Mugabo hesitated. "Someone with me? You mean—" "I'll be by your side," Akimana said confidently. "But we need to make it look like more than just business. Immaculate has been flaunting her relationship with Karangwa, making you look weak. We'll show her that you've moved on." Mugabo looked at Akimana, surprised by her boldness. He had always known she was smart, but this was something else. She wasn't just suggesting a plan. She was ready to step into the role herself. "And what will that cost me?" Mugabo asked, a hint of his old self returning. Akimana smiled, unfazed by his question. 500,000 Rwandan francs to play along for the night, and 300,000 extra if you want it to look convincing. Mugabo chuckled despite the tension. "You drive a hard bargain." "I learned from the best," Akimana said, standing up. "I'll also need a new dress. If we're going to do this, we need to do it right." Mugabo nodded, his mind clearer than it had been in months. For the first time since the affair, he felt like he had a chance to take back control. The night of the company party arrived, and Mugabo, dressed in a tailored suit, stood beside Akimana as they entered the grand ballroom of one of Kigali's most luxurious hotels. The atmosphere was vibrant. Laughter, chatter, and soft music filled the air as executives and investors mingled beneath glittering chandeliers. All eyes turned to Mugabo and Akimana as they entered. She wore a stunning green dress that flowed elegantly as she walked, her arm lightly resting on Mugabo's. The confidence she exuded matched his, and together they made a powerful entrance. For the first time in a long time, Mugabo felt like the man he once was, respected, admired, and in control. As they moved through the crowd, Mugabo spotted Immaculate and Karangwa near the bar. Immaculate was laughing, her arm around Karangwa, who now wore a suit instead of the work clothes Mugabo was used to seeing him in. It was a sharp reminder of how much had changed. But tonight was different. Mugabo wasn't here to wallow in the past. He was here to reclaim his future. As they approached, Immaculate's smile faltered when she saw Akimana by Mugabo's side. Karangwa, always watchful, noticed the tension immediately. Mugabo, Immaculée said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. I didn't expect to see you here with company. Mugabo smiled politely, his hand tightening slightly around Akimana's arm. It's a company event. Why wouldn't I be here? Immaculee's eyes flickered to Akimana, then back to Mugabo. I see you've moved on. Good for you. Akimana, always quick-witted, leaned in slightly, her smile never wavering. Some of us know how to choose partners wisely. Immaculee's face flushed with embarrassment, but she quickly masked it with a forced laugh. Karangwa remained silent, but his jaw clenched. He could sense the shift in power, and it unsettled him. As the evening went on, Mugabo mingled with the guests, his confidence growing with each passing moment. But as the party progressed, something else began to take shape. Liam Jackson, a competitor who had been slowly buying shares in the company, approached Mugabo and Akimana. Enjoying the evening, Mugabo? Liam asked, his voice smooth, but his eyes cold. Mugabo nodded, but his gut told him something was off. Liam smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I've heard some interesting news. It seems Karangwa isn't just your ex-wife's new partner. He's been buying up shares in your company, using third-party buyers. And with Immaculee's help, he's gotten his hands on more than you think. Mugabo felt his chest tighten. He had suspected this, but hearing it confirmed made the situation feel even more dire. I thought you should know, Liam added, his voice dripping with mock concern. Consider it a friendly warning. Mugabo stood in silence as Liam walked away, leaving him and Akimana to process the news. Karangwa wasn't just a gardener anymore. He was Mugabo's biggest threat. Later that evening, Akimana pulled Mugabo aside. There's more to this than you know, she said in a hushed tone. I've been gathering information, and it turns out Karangwa's rise isn't as clean as it seems. Mugabo frowned, his mind racing. What are you saying? Akimana leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. Karangwa's been laundering money through one of Liam's companies. I have proof. If we expose him, we can stop him from taking over the company. Mugabo stared at her, realization dawning on him. Akimana had been working behind the scenes, not just as his assistant, but as someone protecting him from a deeper threat. We need to move fast, she said firmly. If you want your company back, this is your chance. Mugabo nodded, determination rising within him. He wasn't going to let Karangwa win, not after everything. In the days following the company party, Mugabo and Akimana worked together to gather more information. Akimana had already secured proof of Karangwa's money laundering and shady dealings with Liam. The documents she had collected showed how Karangwa had funneled money through Liam's businesses to purchase shares in Mugabo Enterprises, all under the radar. Mugabo knew he couldn't just confront Karangwa and Liam head-on. They were smart, and if they caught wind of what he was planning, they could easily cover their tracks. Instead, he needed to act strategically, quietly and quickly. First, Mugabo called a secret meeting with the board of directors. These were the same people who had allowed Karangwa to rise in power, but they were still businessmen at heart. They cared about their reputations and their profits. Mugabo knew that if he could prove that Karangwa and Liam were involved in illegal activities, the board would turn on them in an instant. At the meeting, Mugabo presented the evidence Akimana had gathered. The room fell silent as the board members flipped through the documents, bank records, wire transfers, and email exchanges between Karangwa and Liam. As the truth dawned on them, their faces grew pale. These are serious allegations, Mugabo, one of the board members said, his voice shaky. If this gets out, it could ruin the company. That's exactly why we need to act now, Mugabo replied calmly. We have two choices. Either we let Karangwa and Liam continue their corruption and risk everything we built, or we take control and remove them before it's too late. The board members looked at each other, realizing the gravity of the situation. They had trusted Karangwa, but now they saw him for what he really was, a criminal, hiding behind a polished exterior. One by one, they nodded in agreement. "What do you propose?" the chairman asked. Mugabo leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "We expose them, quietly. We take back the shares Karangwa and Liam acquired illegally, and we restore the company's integrity. But we do this carefully so the company's reputation remains intact." With the board on his side, Mugabo's plan was set in motion. The next step was to deal with Karangwa and Liam directly. Mugabo knew that they would never admit to their wrongdoings, so he had to catch them by surprise. A week later, Mugabo arranged for another board meeting. This time, Karangwa and Liam were both present, unaware that the tide had turned against them. As they entered the boardroom, they were met with polite smiles, but the atmosphere was tense. Something was different, but neither Karangwa nor Liam could put their finger on it. As the meeting began, Mugabo took control of the discussion. He started by reviewing the company's performance, casually mentioning the recent stock purchases and investments. Karangwa and Liam, feeling confident, exchanged knowing glances, believing they were still in control. But then Mugabo dropped the bombshell. "We've uncovered some troubling financial activity," Mugabo said, his voice calm but firm. "It appears that certain shares were purchased using funds obtained through illegal channels. After a thorough investigation, we have proof that these activities are linked to Karangwa and Liam Jackson." The room fell silent as Mugabo handed out the documents to the board members. Karangwa's face went pale as he realized what was happening. "This is absurd," Karangwa stammered, trying to keep his composure. "I've done nothing wrong." Liam leaned back in his chair, his usual arrogance fading as he scanned the documents. He knew the game was over. "You can deny it all you want," Mugabo continued, "but the evidence speaks for itself. The board has already reviewed everything, and they've agreed that your actions are grounds for immediate dismissal and legal action." Karangwa stood up, his hands shaking with rage. "You can't do this to me. I own shares in this company." Mugabo met his gaze, his voice cold and steady. "Not anymore. The shares you acquired were purchased illegally, which means they are null and void. The board has voted to revoke them." Liam, seeing no way out, tried to salvage what little power he had left. "You can't ruin me, Mugabo. You'll bring the whole company down if this gets out." Mugabo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's where you're wrong. This doesn't have to go public. Unless you force my hand, walk away quietly, and we can keep this between us. But if you try to fight, I'll make sure the authorities get involved. And trust me, they'll be very interested in your dealings." Karangwa's face twisted with anger, but he knew he had lost. Without another word, he stormed out of the room, followed closely by Liam. Their downfall was swift, and Mugabo had won. With Karangwa and Liam gone, Mugabo felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He had finally taken back control of his company, and more importantly, his life. The board, grateful for how he had handled the situation, reinstated him as the rightful leader of Mugabo Enterprises. His reputation, once threatened by the betrayal and deceit, was now stronger than ever. But Mugabo knew that this victory wasn't just about business, it was personal. He had fought to reclaim his pride, his dignity, and his future. And he had done it with the help of someone who had stood by him through it all, Akimana. After the meeting, Akimana found him in his office, the two of them alone once again. "You did it," she said, a smile of pride on her face. "We did it," Mugabo corrected, looking at her with gratitude. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Akimana shrugged, though her smile grew wider. Maybe, but you're the one who had the courage to stand up and fight. Mugabo paused, taking in the moment. So what now? He asked. Akimana raised an eyebrow. Well, you still owe me for that night at the party? She teased. I think we agreed on 300,000 francs for a convincing act. Mugabo laughed for the first time in what felt like ages. I think you've earned much more than that, he said warmly. But I'm hoping this time it doesn't have to be an act. Akimana's eyes sparkled as she nodded. No, this time it's real. And with that, Mugabo knew that he had not only reclaimed his company, but he had also found something even more valuable, a partner who believed in him when he had lost belief in himself. Then end. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share this video.